The pre-dawn darkness over Bagram Airfield was split by the rhythmic thunder of rotor blades as Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez performed her final equipment check. Her fingers moved with practiced precision across the medical kit strapped to her chest: tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, chest seals, IV lines, morphine auto-injectors. Everything had its place. Everything had a purpose. In her line of work, a missing piece of equipment didn't mean a failed inspection. It meant someone died. At 28 years old, Maya had spent the last 6 years proving she belonged in places where most people said women didn't. The Combat Search and Rescue Course had a 90% failure rate for male candidates. She'd graduated third in her class. The Advanced Tactical Paramedic certification pushed seasoned Special Forces medics to their breaking point. She'd earned perfect scores. The high-altitude parachute training had hospitalized 2 men in her group. She'd walked away asking for extra jumps. But statistics and scores didn't matter to everyone. Even now, after 73 successful combat missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, after pulling wounded soldiers from burning vehicles and performing emergency surgery in the dirt while bullets snapped overhead, she still caught the sidelong glances, still heard the whispers in the chow hall when she walked past. Female PJ won't last 6 months in country. That had been the prediction when she'd first arrived at the Forward Operating Base in Kunar Province. That was 2 years and 6 months ago. Maya had learned early that words were wasted breath. Let them talk. Let them doubt. She'd let her actions carve her reputation into the hardened ground of Afghanistan's most dangerous province. The men she'd saved didn't care about her gender. The pilots who flew with her trusted her with their lives. The SEALs, Force Recon Marines, and Army Rangers who operated in the deadly valleys and mountains surrounding the base had requested her by name for their missions. That was the only validation she needed. "Rodriguez, you good?" The voice crackled through her headset. Captain Michael Torres, her pilot, twisted in his seat to look back at her. He was 35, a veteran of over 200 combat missions, and had more flight hours in hostile territory than most pilots would accumulate in their entire careers. He'd initially been skeptical when Maya had been assigned to his crew. That lasted exactly 1 mission, until he watched her rappel from a hovering helicopter into a firefight to drag out a wounded ranger, then calmly dress his wounds while the Black Hawk took fire on the extraction. "Good to go, Captain," Maya replied, giving him a thumbs up. She settled back against the web seating, feeling the familiar vibration of the MH-60 Pave Hawk helicopter thrumming through her body. This bird had been her office, her second home, for hundreds of missions. She knew every rivet, every patch where mechanics had repaired bullet holes, every quirk of its engines. Beside her sat Sergeant First Class David Kim, her team's other pararescue specialist. At 42, Kim was a legend in the PJ community, a man who'd been doing this job since before Maya was old enough to drive. He'd seen everything, survived everything, and had the scars to prove it. He treated Maya not as a novelty or a diversity checkbox, but as his equal. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between missions, he told her she was better than he'd been at her age. Coming from Kim, that meant everything. "Big day," Kim said, his voice calm despite the gravity of what they were about to do. He was checking his own gear with the same methodical care Maya had shown. "SEALs going after a high-value target in the Pech. Intel says the Taliban's got the valley reinforced heavy." Maya nodded. She'd studied the mission briefing for 2 hours the night before, had memorized satellite imagery of every possible landing zone in the area, had reviewed the medical profiles of every SEAL on the team they'd be supporting. Preparation wasn't just professional, it was survival. The Pech River Valley had earned its reputation written in blood. More American helicopters had been shot down there than anywhere else in Afghanistan. The mountains were so steep and narrow that aircraft had to fly through channels where enemy fighters on the ridges could shoot down at them. It was a shooting gallery, and they were the targets. But that's where Americans were fighting. That's where Americans were bleeding, so that's where Maya went. She pulled out a worn photograph from her breast pocket, her ritual before every mission. Her mother and younger sister, Maria, stood in front of their small house in El Paso, Texas. The photo was 3 years old, taken during her last leave. Her mother's eyes held pride and worry in equal measure. Maria, now 18 and in her first year of college, had her arm around their mother, both of them smiling at the camera. Maya had sent them letters when she could, carefully edited to remove anything that would make them lose sleep. They knew she was in Afghanistan. They didn't need to know how often she came back with other people's blood on her uniform. "Families?" Kim asked, noticing the photo. "Yeah," Maya said softly. "You." "Wife and 2 boys, 17 and 15 now." Kim smiled, but there was weight behind it. "The oldest wants to join the Air Force, follow his old man. I keep telling him to be a dentist instead. Better hours, nobody shoots at you." Maya managed a small laugh, tucking the photo back into her pocket, right over her heart. "And if he's anything like you, he won't listen." "Damn straight," Kim said with pride. The helicopter banked, and through the open door, Maya could see the first rays of sunlight painting the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful, a savage, deadly beauty that had swallowed empires. The British couldn't tame these mountains. The Soviets had bled here for a decade. Now it was America's turn to fight in this unforgiving landscape. 15 minutes out, Tors announced through the headset. "Intel reports the SEALs are in position. So far, no contact." Maya felt the familiar pre-mission focus narrow her world. The fatigue from 3 hours of sleep vanished. The ache in her shoulder from a hard landing 2 days ago disappeared. There was only the mission now. Only the job. Only the brothers who might need her. She didn't know that in less than 20 minutes she'd be declared dead. She didn't know she was about to face the fight of her life. She didn't know that this mission would become the story that changed everything. All she knew was that somewhere in that valley, American warriors were hunting evil, and if any of them fell, she'd be there to bring them home. The helicopter dropped into the valley, and Maya Rodriguez leaned forward, ready for whatever came next. She was always ready. The Pech River Valley opened below them like the throat of a beast. Maya stared down at the serpentine ribbon of water cutting through vertical walls of rock and scree. Villages clung to impossible slopes, connected by goat trails that zigzagged through terrain that looked more vertical than horizontal. This wasn't just hostile territory. This was where the enemy had home field advantage, where they'd been fighting invaders for generations, where they knew every cave, every ridge, every ambush point. "Visual on the SEALs," Tors called out. 2 o'clock ridgeline. Maya spotted them through her optics, 6 figures in tactical formation, moving like shadows along a narrow trail 800 feet above the valley floor. SEAL Team 6 reconnaissance element, hunting a Taliban commander who'd orchestrated attacks that had killed 17 Americans in the past month. The man was a ghost, appearing and disappearing into these mountains like smoke. But intelligence had finally pinpointed his location, and the SEALs were moving to capture or kill. "Rescue 3-2, this is Reaper 1-6. The SEAL team leader's voice came through calm and professional. "We have eyes on the compound. Beginning surveillance. Request you maintain orbit at grid November Victor 3724. "Copy Reaper," Tors acknowledged, banking the helicopter into a lazy circle 3 kilometers from the SEAL position. This was the routine part, the waiting. They'd circle, watch, and hope the radio stayed quiet. Most missions ended without them ever being needed. Most missions. Maya checked her watch. 6:47 hours. The sun was fully up now, already baking the mountains. She could see heat shimmer rising from the rocks below. It was going to be another scorching day, 115 degrees in the shade if you could find any shade in this moonscape. Kim was dozing, his head back against the bulkhead, somehow able to sleep through the rotor noise and turbulence. Maya envied that ability. She'd never been able to rest before a mission ended. Her mind stayed locked on mission-critical frequencies, ready to respond in seconds. 45 minutes passed, then another 30. The radio chatter remained routine, position updates, minor adjustments, nothing urgent. Maya felt herself settling into the rhythm of the mission, the steady thrum of the rotors becoming almost meditative. Then everything changed. Contact, contact. We are taking heavy fire from multiple positions. The SEAL team leader's voice exploded through the radio, the professional calm shattered by urgency. We are compromised. Request immediate. The transmission cut off as gunfire roared in the background. Maya was instantly alert, her hand already on her medical kit. Kim's eyes snapped open. All units, Reaper 16 is engaged. The command post broke in. Rescue 32, stand by for emergency extraction. Tors had already banked the helicopter hard, the bird's nose dropping as he accelerated toward the SEAL position. Through the door, Maya could see muzzle flashes sparking along multiple ridgelines. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was a planned ambush. The Taliban had been waiting. Reaper, this is Rescue 32. What's your status? Tors called. Gunfire drowned out the words. Hit. One urgent, one priority. We need immediate extract. Grid November, more gunfire. They've got us surrounded. RPGs inbound. Maya's stomach tightened. Surrounded meant the SEALs couldn't maneuver to a safe landing zone. They were pinned. And RPGs meant the Taliban had anti-aircraft capability. Flying into that was suicide. Tors didn't hesitate. Reaper, we're 2 minutes out. Mark your position with smoke. Negative on smoke, we're trying to break contact, moving to alternate LZ. The SEAL's breathing was labored. He was running, fighting, trying to keep his team alive. Heavy resistance, at least 40 enemy fighters. Be advised, they have. The transmission dissolved into static, then came back. Multiple RPG teams. Valley is hot. I repeat, Valley is hot. Captain, that's a kill zone, the co-pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, said quietly. She was right. Everything about this screamed trap. The Taliban had learned that Americans would always come for their wounded. They'd learned to use that against them. Tors' jaw set hard. Those are our boys down there. We're going in. He looked back at Maya and Kim. You two get ready. This is going to be fast and dirty. Maya double-checked every piece of gear, made sure her weapon was hot, prepped her litter straps. Beside her, Kim did the same. They'd done this dance before, going into hell to pull out brothers in arms. The helicopter dropped into the valley, and Maya's world contracted to pure focus. Through the door, she could see the SEAL position now, muzzle flashes from a small cluster of rocks as they fought off attackers from 3 sides. Bodies of Taliban fighters littered the slope. These weren't amateur fighters. This was a coordinated assault by experienced insurgents. 30 seconds, Tors called out. Then the world turned to chaos. A streak of white smoke erupted from a ridgeline to their left. RPG, Chen screamed. Tors jerked the helicopter hard right. The rocket-propelled grenade screamed past the windscreen so close Maya could see the fins spinning. It missed by 3 feet, close enough that the concussion wave rocked the bird violently. Taking fire from multiple positions. Chen's hands flew across the controls, managing defensive systems as tracers lit up the air around them. Another RPG launch, this one from directly ahead. Tors yanked the collective, the helicopter climbing desperately. The grenade passed underneath them, so close Maya felt the heat wash through the open door. But the third one found its mark. The explosion was deafening. The tail rotor disintegrated in a shower of metal and flame. Alarms screamed. The helicopter spun violently to the right, centrifugal force pinning Maya against the bulkhead. She grabbed for a handhold, her training screaming at her to brace, to prepare for impact. Mayday, mayday, we're going down. Tors was fighting the controls, but physics had already won. Without the tail rotor, they were a 16,000-pound rock falling from the sky. The helicopter rotated faster, the world outside becoming a blur of rock and sky and rock again. Maya felt her harness straining, felt the metal frame of the helicopter groaning as structural limits were exceeded. Equipment tore free, flying through the cabin. The windscreen exploded inward as a boulder loomed ahead. "Brace, brace, brace," Tor's last command. The initial impact was catastrophic. The helicopter's belly struck a rocky outcrop, the sound like a bomb detonating. The airframe crumpled, twisted, came apart. Maya's harness snapped like thread. She was airborne, weightless for a moment that stretched into eternity, flying through the shattered door as the helicopter cartwheeled down the mountainside behind her. Trees, she was flying toward trees. Then she hit the first branch at 30 miles per hour, her body armor torn away by the impact. Another branch, another bone-rattling collision. She tried to grab something, anything, but momentum was unstoppable. The world was a chaos of green and brown and pain. Her head struck something solid. Then darkness. Absolute darkness. The last thing Maya heard before consciousness fled was the distant sound of the helicopter's final impact. Metal screaming against rock, fuel igniting, the percussion of secondary explosions. Then nothing. Silence. The valley swallowed her whole. Captain Jake Halloran's quick reaction force helicopter circled the crash site 32 minutes after Maya's bird went down. Through the smoke rising from the valley floor, he could see the twisted wreckage of Rescue 32 scattered across 100 yards of mountainside. The main fuselage had tumbled into a ravine, leaving a debris trail of torn metal, shattered equipment, and fuel-fed flames that sent black plumes into the cloudless sky. "Base, this is Rescue 41, Halloran transmitted, his voice tight. "We have visual on the crash site. It's bad, real bad." The helicopter descended as low as the terrain allowed, rotor wash whipping the smoke into frenzied spirals. Halloran's crew chief, Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, had his rifle ready, scanning for threats. The Taliban fighters who'd shot down the helicopter were still in the area. Tracers occasionally sparked from ridgelines as they tried to keep the QRF away from the wreck. "I've got 2 bodies near the cockpit," Webb reported, his binoculars pressed to his face. "Looks like, Jesus, that's Tors and Chen. They didn't make it." Halloran felt his chest tighten. Mike Tors had been a friend, a damn good pilot who'd saved more lives than most people would ever know. Sarah Chen had been engaged, her wedding planned for next month. Both gone in an instant. "What about Rodriguez and Kim?" Halloran demanded. "The PJs, do you see them?" Webb scanned the wreckage again, working his way through the debris field systematically. The helicopter had broken into 3 major sections. The cockpit was crushed against a boulder. The tail section was burning 50 yards upslope. The main cabin had been torn open like a tin can, its contents vomited across the rocky terrain. "Negative on visual," Webb said. "Wait, I've got something. Body armor looks like. Yeah, that's a PJ vest. It's empty, ripped right off someone." "Can you get to it?" "Not without landing, and this LZ is way too hot. We're taking fire from." Webb's words were punctuated by the crack of bullets striking the helicopter's armored hull. "From multiple positions. We need to pull back." Halloran cursed. The Taliban knew the Americans would come for their dead. They were using the crash site as bait, waiting for rescue birds to get close enough for a killing shot. "One more pass. We have to find Rodriguez and Kim." The helicopter banked hard, trading altitude for speed as it swept over the debris field again. Webb's camera captured everything: the shattered remains of the aircraft, the bodies of the pilots, and crucially the evidence scattered across the mountainside. Maya's body armor, torn and bloodied, lay 50 yards from the main wreckage. Her helmet was further down the slope, cracked nearly in half. Medical supplies, bandages, IV bags, morphine injectors were strewn across the rocks like confetti. "I've got blood trails," Webb reported, zooming in with the camera. "Multiple blood trails leading from the wreckage into that thick vegetation. Heavy amounts. This wasn't survivable." An RPG streaked past the helicopter, close enough that Halloran felt the pressure wave. "That's it, we're out of here. We'll come back with more firepower." The helicopter climbed rapidly, putting distance between them and the kill zone. Halloran's mind was already racing through the next steps. They'd need Apache gunships to suppress the enemy positions, a larger ground force to secure the crash site, casualty evacuation for the remains. His hand trembled slightly as he keyed the radio. "Base, this is Rescue 4-1. Crash site is under heavy enemy fire. Confirmed 2 KIA Torres and Chen. Still searching for Rodriguez and Kim, but..." He paused, looking at the images Webb was transmitting back. "Evidence suggests they were ejected during the crash. Found Rodriguez's body armor and helmet, both damaged, significant blood at the scene. No bodies recovered yet. Request additional assets for site security and remains recovery." At the forward operating base, Commander James Peterson stood in the Tactical Operations Center, watching the live feed from Halloran's camera on the main screen. The evidence was damning. The severity of the crash, the amount of blood, the scattered equipment, everything pointed to catastrophic casualties. "Get me everything we have on that crash site," Peterson ordered. His operations officer, Major Sarah Williams, was already pulling up satellite imagery and drone footage. "Sir, we've got multiple angles from the surveillance drone that was overhead when they went down," Williams said, bringing up the video. They watched in silence as the helicopter took the RPG hit, saw it spin out of control, saw it impact and tumble down the mountainside in a sequence that made Peterson's stomach turn. "Anyone could have survived that?" he asked quietly. Williams shook her head. "Sir, that helicopter hit at approximately 90 miles per hour, then tumbled another 200 yards down a rocky slope. The G-forces alone..." She didn't need to finish. The QRF made 2 more attempts over the next 4 hours. Each time, heavy Taliban fire drove them back before they could land. An Apache gunship strike cleared some of the enemy positions, but insurgents kept filtering back into the area. It was clear they weren't going to give up the crash site easily. They knew the propaganda value of captured American remains, or worse, captured American prisoners. By 1400 hours, a heavily reinforced ground element finally reached the wreckage. Peterson listened over the radio as they cleared the site, his hope diminishing with each report. "Base, we have remains of 2 pilots, both KIA at impact, preparing for respectful transfer." "Copy, what about the PJs?" A long pause. "Sir, we found pieces of equipment, Rodriguez's medical kit torn open, Kim's weapon bent in half, more body armor fragments. There's blood evidence throughout the debris field and leading into heavy vegetation, but the blood trails end after about 75 yards. The volume of blood suggests." The ground force commander's voice was heavy. "Sir, they couldn't have gotten far in this condition. The terrain beyond the blood trails is nearly vertical cliffside and heavy forest. We've searched as far as we can safely go. The Taliban controls everything beyond our perimeter." Peterson closed his eyes. Maya Rodriguez, David Kim, 2 of the finest pararescue men he'd ever commanded. He'd sent them on this mission. He'd watched them climb into that helicopter. "Sir, we need a decision," Williams said softly. "The evidence is conclusive. The crash was catastrophic. The blood loss alone." Peterson understood what she was saying. They couldn't keep a rescue force in hostile territory indefinitely, searching for remains that might have been carried off by the Taliban or were simply unrecoverable in the terrain. They had the pilots' bodies. They had extensive physical evidence. They had drone footage showing no survivors walking away from the crash. He walked to his desk and sat down heavily. The hardest part of command, the part they never really prepared you for, was moments like this. He pulled out the casualty notification forms, the papers that would destroy families and end the waiting with terrible certainty. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, serial number 2,847,593, date of death, July 19, 2011, cause, KIA hostile fire helicopter crash. Sergeant First Class David Kim, serial number 1,639,847, date of death, July 19, 2011, cause, KIA hostile fire helicopter crash. His hand shook as he signed the forms. Outside his window, he could see the base flag being lowered to half-staff, the ancient ritual of honoring the fallen. He thought of Maya, the young woman who'd fought so hard to prove herself, who'd saved so many lives, who'd smiled when people doubted her and let her actions speak instead. "Get me their personnel files," Peterson said quietly. "I need to prepare letters for the families and notify the Air Force mortuary affairs. Tell them we're still working on remains recovery, but—" He couldn't finish the sentence. In the operations center, they began the grim process of updating casualty boards. Maya's photo was moved from active personnel to the memorial wall, a wall that had grown too large in the 2 years this base had been operational. Her service record was annotated with her final mission. Her gear locker would be inventoried and prepared for shipment home. 6 time zones away, a chaplain was already driving toward a small house in El Paso, Texas, carrying news that would shatter a mother and sister's world. The official determination was made at 16:47 hours, July 19, 2011. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez was declared killed in action. What nobody knew, what nobody could have known, was that at that exact moment, 300 yards from where they'd searched, Maya Rodriguez was regaining consciousness in a tangle of brush and broken trees, her body broken but her heart still beating. The military had declared her dead. She was about to prove them wrong. Pain. That was the first thing Maya Rodriguez knew when consciousness crept back like a thief in the night. Not just pain, a symphony of agony that radiated from every inch of her body. Her head felt like it had been split open with an axe. Each breath sent knives through her ribs. Her left arm was a screaming mass of fire that she couldn't move, couldn't feel beyond the blinding hurt. She tried to open her eyes, but only one responded. The other was swollen shut, crusted with dried blood. Through her functioning eye, she saw green leaves, branches, vegetation. She was lying on her back in thick brush, staring up through a canopy of trees at a slice of impossibly blue sky. Where was she? Memory was fractured like trying to reassemble a shattered mirror. Pieces came back slowly, jagged and incomplete. The mission, the SEALs, the helicopter, the valley, then nothing. A blank space where the crash should be. Maya tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The world spun violently, her vision tunneling to a pinpoint before slowly expanding again. Nausea rolled through her stomach. Concussion. Definitely a concussion, maybe a severe one. She lay back, breathing shallow, trying to assess the damage through the fog of pain and disorientation. Her training pushed through the chaos. Primary survey. Airway clear. Breathing painful but functional. Circulation, heart pounding too fast, but that was adrenaline and shock. Secondary survey. Her left arm was wrong, not just painful, wrong. She managed to turn her head enough to look at it. The forearm bent at an unnatural angle halfway between her wrist and elbow. Compound fracture, probably both radius and ulna. The bone hadn't broken through the skin, small miracle, but the swelling was already grotesque. Her ribs. She probed gently with her right hand, felt the grinding sensation of bone fragments moving against each other. Broken ribs, at least 3 on her left side, maybe more. She tested her breathing, checking for the telltale signs of a punctured lung, the bubbling sensation, the difficulty drawing air. Nothing. Another miracle. The ribs were broken but hadn't pierced anything vital. Her legs. She wiggled her toes, they responded. Bent her knees, pain, but they moved. Not paralyzed. The small victories were stacking up, though they didn't feel like victories when every movement brought fresh waves of agony. How long had she been unconscious? The light filtering through the trees suggested late afternoon, maybe early evening. That meant hours. Hours lying exposed on a hostile mountainside while her body slowly decided whether to live or die. And then, through the ringing in her ears, through the sound of her own labored breathing, she heard it. Voices. American voices. "Jenkins, you've got rear security. Watch that ridgeline. We're running low on ammo. I'm down to 2 mags. Where the hell is that extract? We need it now." Gunfire, distant but distinct. The sharp crack of M4 rifles, the heavier boom of enemy AKs, the SEALs. They were still out there, still fighting. Maya's mind cleared like fog burning off in sunlight. The mission. The SEALs were pinned down, taking casualties, calling for extraction. Her helicopter had been coming to get them when it crashed. The memory hit her like a physical blow. The RPG impact, the spin, the terror of falling towards Chen, Kim, oh God, Kim. She was alone, the others were. She pushed the thought away. She couldn't help them now, but she could help the SEALs. Maya forced herself to focus past the pain. She was alive. Broken, but alive. And somewhere up that mountain, American warriors were bleeding, dying, waiting for help that they thought was coming. Help that her dead helicopter was supposed to provide. They didn't know the helicopter was destroyed. They didn't know their rescue was scattered across a mountainside. They were still waiting, still fighting, still hopping. "I need to get up," Maya whispered to herself, the words thick through split lips. Her mouth tasted like copper. She'd bitten through her tongue at some point. But first she needed to stabilize her arm. A broken limb wasn't just painful, it was a liability. The jagged bone ends could sever arteries, could turn a survivable injury into a fatal one. She needed a splint. Using her good hand, Maya felt around in the brush until she found what she needed, 2 relatively straight branches, each about a foot long. She pulled off her belt with her teeth and right hand, a process that took 5 agonizing minutes. Then came the hard part. She positioned the branches on either side of her broken forearm, drew a deep breath, and pulled. The scream that tore from her throat startled birds from the trees. White-hot agony exploded up her arm as she straightened the bent bones, feeling them grind and shift. Tears streamed from her good eye. Her vision went gray at the edges. But she held the alignment, wrapped her belt around the branches and her arm, pulled it tight with her teeth. When it was done, she lay back, gasping, her body shaking with shock and pain. But the arm was stabilized. It was crude, barely adequate, but it would keep the bones from doing more damage. "Okay," she panted. "Okay, phase 1 done." She listened again. The gunfire was more intense now, closer. The SEALs were in trouble, real trouble. Maya rolled onto her right side, biting back a scream as her broken ribs protested. She got her good arm under her, pushed. The world tilted crazily. She vomited into the brush, her body purging itself, then pushed again. Inch by inch she got her knees under her, then 1 foot, then the other. Standing took 10 minutes and cost her reserves she didn't know she had. She swayed like a drunk, her vision swimming, her balance destroyed by the concussion. But she was upright, vertical, mobile. She looked around, trying to orient herself. Through gaps in the trees, she could see smoke rising from the valley below, her helicopter still burning. She was upslope from the crash site, thrown clear when. She didn't remember, didn't matter. What mattered was the sound of American voices, calling for help somewhere above her position. Maya started to climb. Every step was a negotiation with gravity and pain. Her broken ribs screamed with each breath. Her splinted arm hung useless at her side. Her head pounded with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Blood dripped from a gash on her scalp, running down her neck, soaking into what was left of her uniform. She climbed anyway. Through the brush, using trees for support, pulling herself up the impossible slope with her one good arm. She fell twice in the first 50 yards, the impacts sending fresh lightning bolts of agony through her broken body. Each time she lay there, considering the option of just stopping, just lying down and waiting for someone else to handle it. Each time she got back up. Because that's what PJs did. That's what Maya Rodriguez did. Others might quit. Others might decide they'd done enough, that they were too hurt, that someone else would come. Maya wasn't others. Reaper 1-6, this is base. Extract is delayed. The QRF took heavy fire. You need to hold position for emergency pickup. ETA 90 minutes. The radio transmission crackled from somewhere ahead, faint but audible. 90 minutes. The SEALs had to survive 90 more minutes against a force that outnumbered them, that had them pinned, that was trying to overrun their position before help could arrive. 90 minutes might as well be 90 years if they had casualties bleeding out. Maya climbed faster, ignoring the way her vision blurred, ignoring the warm trickle of blood running down her leg from wounds she hadn't even cataloged yet. She climbed through Taliban territory, through terrain where insurgents were hunting for survivors from her crash. She climbed because 6 Navy SEALs were dying up there. She climbed because the helicopter that was supposed to save them was a smoking ruin. She climbed because everyone thought she was dead, which meant no one was coming for those men except her. 200 yards became 300. 300 became 4. The slope was nearly vertical in places, forcing her to use rock outcroppings and tree roots to pull herself higher. Her right hand was bleeding, torn by sharp stone. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. But she could hear the SEALs more clearly now, their voices, their weapons, and something else, something that cut through her pain-induced haze like a knife. Someone was crying out, wounded in pain. Maya's training overrode everything else. She was a pararescueman. That crying meant her skills were needed. Nothing else mattered, not her broken body, not the enemy, not the fact that she'd been declared dead back at base. Someone needed a medic. She was a medic. End of discussion. Maya crested a rocky ridge and saw them, 6 men in tactical gear, in a desperate defensive position among a cluster of boulders. 2 weren't moving right. One clutched his chest, his hand bright red. Another's leg was tourniqueted, but blood still pooled beneath him. She stumbled forward, her vision tunneling to just them, just the mission. Need a medic. The words came out as barely a croak. 6 heads turned. 6 pairs of eyes went wide with shock. One SEAL, his face streaked with dirt and blood, whispered what they were all thinking. Jesus Christ, you're supposed to be dead. Lieutenant Commander Jake Mitchell had seen a lot in 12 years as a Navy SEAL. He'd seen men fight with mortal wounds. He'd seen impossible acts of courage under fire. He'd seen brothers carry each other through hell and come out the other side. But he'd never seen a ghost walk out of the mountains. Yet there she stood, Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, the pararescue specialist they'd been told was killed when her helicopter went down 4 hours ago. Except she wasn't dead. She was a nightmare vision of trauma and determination, swaying on her feet, her left arm crudely splinted with tree branches, blood covering half her face, her uniform shredded and soaked with crimson. But her one good eye was clear, focused, and locked on his wounded men. Rodriguez, Mitchell couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. They said the helicopter crashed. They said everyone was KIA. Talk later, Maya rasped, already moving past him toward the casualties. Work now. She dropped to her knees beside Petty Officer 2nd Class James Chen, and Mitchell saw her wince, a brief flash of pain that she immediately suppressed. Chen was on his back, his breathing rapid and shallow, his hand pressed against his chest where his plate carrier had been penetrated by a 7.62 round. Blood bubbled between his fingers with each exhale. Sucking chest wound, Maya said, her voice suddenly clinical, professional. The pain-racked survivor disappeared, replaced by the combat medic. How long? 20 minutes, replied Petty Officer 1st Class Marcus Davis from his position 3 feet away. Davis had his own problems, a tourniquet on his right thigh where shrapnel had opened his femoral artery. His face was pale, shock setting in. Maya's right hand moved with practiced precision despite her injuries. She had no medical kit. It had been scattered with the helicopter crash. But she still had knowledge, training, and the absolute refusal to let anyone die on her watch. "Chen, look at me," she commanded. His eyes found hers, wide with fear and pain. "You're going to be fine. I need you to move your hand. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Chen moved his hand. Blood and air hissed from the wound, a hole the size of a quarter just below his left collarbone. Maya could see the lung deflating with each breath, could see the tension pneumothorax developing. Without treatment in the next few minutes, Chen's collapsed lung would compress his heart, drop his blood pressure, and kill him. She needed a chest seal. She didn't have one. "Mitchell, I need your admin pouch, now." The SEAL commander didn't question. He tossed her the small waterproof pouch every operator carried with maps, notes, and intelligence materials. Maya dumped it, grabbed one of the waterproof document sleeves, thick plastic adhesive edge. Not designed for this, but it would work. She ripped open Chen's shirt fully, exposing the wound. Blood ran freely. She grabbed a piece of gauze from Mitchell's personal first aid kit, wiped the area as clean as she could with her one good hand, then slapped the plastic sleeve over the wound hole, pressing down hard on 3 sides, leaving one edge unsealed. "This is going to hurt," she warned. Then she pressed her palm against Chen's chest, hard, feeling for the resistance of the collapsed lung. She found a specific point 2 inches below the wound and drove her thumb down with controlled force. Chen screamed. The trapped air hissed out of the wound, venting through the unsealed edge of the plastic. His breathing immediately became easier, deeper. The cyanosis, the blue tinge to his lips, began to fade. "Tension pneumothorax relieved," Maya announced. She sealed the 4th edge of the plastic. "Improvised chest seal in place. He'll need a hospital, but he's stable for now." She turned to Davis before anyone could respond. His tourniquet was applied correctly, but it had been on for over 30 minutes. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound itself hadn't been dressed, and she could see fresh blood seeping around the edges. "Davis, how's your pain?" she asked, already assessing the injury. "Been better, Doc," he managed a weak smile, "but I hear you've had a worse day than me." "We'll compare notes later." Maya examined the tourniquet position, checked for distal pulses, none, which was expected. The tourniquet was working, keeping him from bleeding out, but she needed to see the actual wound. With careful precision, she loosened the tourniquet slightly, keeping pressure ready. Blood welled up immediately, too much blood. The shrapnel had done more damage than a simple laceration. She could see the wound was deep, possibly into the femoral artery itself. She tightened the tourniquet again, then used combat gauze from another SEAL's kit to pack the wound as tightly as she could. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through her broken ribs, but her hands never shook. "Wound packed, tourniquet stays on. He's got maybe 2 hours before we need to worry about limb ischemia," she said. Then she looked up at Mitchell. "Extraction status." Mitchell's expression darkened. "Your bird was our ride. Command says they're sending another QRF, but the valley's too hot. They're looking at 90 minutes minimum, maybe longer. They need Apache support to clear the approach routes." Maya processed this, her tactical mind already working through the implications. She looked around their position, a cluster of boulders providing cover from 3 directions, but the 4th was exposed to the ridgeline where Taliban fighters kept popping up to take shots. Bodies of enemy fighters littered the slope below their position. The SEALs had been fighting hard. "How many hostiles?" she asked. "Started with 40 plus. We've dropped maybe 15, but they keep getting reinforcements." Mitchell pointed to the ridgeline surrounding them. "They know we're pinned. They're going to mass for an assault once it gets dark." Maya checked her watch with her splinted arm. 1,820 hours. Sunset in 90 minutes. The Taliban love to attack at dusk, using the failing light to close distance before night vision gave the Americans the advantage. And they know a helicopter crashed, Maya added quietly. They'll be searching for survivors, for bodies, for prisoners. This whole area is going to be crawling with fighters. Which brings us to our problem, Mitchell said. This LZ is compromised. Command knows it. The Taliban knows it. Any helicopter that comes here is going to eat RPGs just like yours did. Maya understood immediately. They couldn't stay here. The position was tactically indefensible for an extended period, and the LZ was a death trap, but moving 2 litter-urgent casualties through hostile mountains at night. There's an alternate LZ, Mitchell continued, pulling out his map. 2 kilometers east. Bigger clearing, better approaches for the birds, harder for the Taliban to cover with RPGs. We scouted it during our infiltration. 2 kilometers, Maya repeated, looking at Chen and Davis. Through enemy territory at night, with 2 men who can't walk. I know it's a lot to ask. I'm not saying no, Maya interrupted. I'm calculating how to make it work. She studied the map, her mind running through the logistics. We'll need litters. We'll need to move during the transition from dusk to full dark, late enough the Taliban can't see us clearly, early enough we can still navigate. And we'll need to move fast because every minute we're in transit is a minute we can get ambushed. Mitchell stared at her. This woman had been thrown from a crashing helicopter, had suffered injuries that should have incapacitated her, had climbed through enemy territory, and was now calmly planning a tactical evacuation like it was a training exercise. Rodriguez, you can barely stand. Your arm is broken. You've got a head injury that. Doesn't matter, Maya cut him off, her voice hard as steel. What matters is getting your men out alive. You've got 4 operators who can walk and fight. You need them on security and carrying the litters. That leaves me for medical support and navigation. You can't. Yes, I can. She locked eyes with him. I've carried wounded before. I can do it again. The question isn't whether I can, it's whether you're going to waste time arguing with me while your men bleed. A burst of gunfire from the ridgeline punctuated her words. Rounds sparked off the boulders protecting them. One of the SEALs returned fire, dropping an insurgent who'd gotten too bold. Mitchell made his decision. All right, we move in 45 minutes, but Rodriguez, if you fall out, we're carrying you too. Fair enough, Maya agreed. Then she turned back to Chen and Davis. Gentlemen, you're going for a ride. I'm going to make sure you survive it. That's a promise. Chen managed a weak thumbs up. Davis just nodded, his face pale but determined. Maya began scavenging materials for litters, broken branches, paracord, whatever she could find. The other SEALs helped, following her instructions. She worked with single-minded focus, ignoring the blood still running down her face, ignoring the way her broken ribs ground against each other with every movement. Because 2 kilometers away was safety. 2 kilometers away was extraction. 2 kilometers away was life. And Maya Rodriguez had never failed to bring her brothers home. She wasn't about to start now. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the Afghan mountains in shades of orange and blood red. Maya Rodriguez worked with mechanical efficiency, using paracord to lash together the makeshift litters. Her right hand was steady despite the pain radiating through her body. The crude stretchers wouldn't win any awards, but they'd hold together long enough to move 2 wounded men 2 kilometers through hell. How are we looking on ammo? Lieutenant Commander Mitchell asked his team, conducting final checks before they abandoned their defensive position. 3 mags each, replied Petty Officer Jake Wilson, the team's breacher, plus 2 frags and 1 smoke. Davis has 4 mags in his kit he can't use, added Petty Officer Tom Hernandez, gesturing to the wounded man on the ground. We redistribute those. We're looking at maybe 400 rounds total. Not enough for a sustained firefight, Maya noted mentally. They'd have to avoid contact if possible, run if necessary, and only fight if they had no other choice. She tested the litter she'd constructed, pulling on the joints, checking the knots. It would hold. It had to. "Rodriguez," Mitchell crouched beside her. "Real talk. You've got a broken arm, broken ribs, probable concussion, and you've lost blood. You want to tell me honestly if you can do this?" Maya looked up at him, her one good eye meeting his gaze without flinching. "Commander, I've been a pararescue specialist for 6 years. Our motto is these things we do that others may live. I didn't just memorize those words, I live them. So yes, I can do this. The real question is whether you trust me enough to try." Mitchell studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you carry medical oversight only until we're clear of immediate contact. Once we start moving, Wilson and Hernandez take the litter's first rotation. You navigate and provide security with that sidearm." Maya glanced down at the M9 pistol one of the SEALs had given her, her own weapon lost in the crash. She checked the magazine, 15 rounds, not much but more than nothing. "Fair enough," she agreed. They waited as the sun touched the mountaintops, the light beginning its rapid fade. In Afghanistan's mountains, twilight didn't linger, day became night like flipping a switch. The Taliban fighters on the surrounding ridges had gone quiet, which was somehow more unnerving than their occasional probing shots. Quiet meant they were repositioning, planning, preparing for something. "They know we're going to move," Mitchell said quietly, voicing what everyone was thinking. "They're probably watching this position right now, waiting to see which direction we go." "Then we give them a direction to watch," Maya said. She pointed to the map. "There's a goat trail heading northwest toward that village. They'll expect us to avoid populated areas, so they'll think we're using it as a feint before cutting east. And we actually go east immediately. Through the steepest, most miserable terrain we can find," Maya confirmed. "No trails, no paths, just straight bushwhacking through the worst possible route. It'll be slower, harder, but they won't expect it." Mitchell smiled grimly. "I'm starting to see why you graduated third in your class." "Second," Maya corrected. "The final rankings got adjusted after the investigation into score manipulation." "Even better." At 18:55 hours, they made their move. Wilson and Hernandez lifted Chen's litter while Mitchell and Petty Officer Ryan Clark took Davis. Maya did one final check of both patients. Chen's improvised chest seal was holding, his breathing remained stable, his color good. Davis's tourniquet showed no signs of breakthrough bleeding. "You're both doing great," she told them quietly. "Stay with me, 2 clicks and we're home free." "Define home free," Davis managed to joke, his voice weak but steady. "Morphine, hot chow, and a pretty nurse who isn't me," Maya replied. Despite everything, the men chuckled. The team moved out, leaving their defensive position in a tactical formation that put the litters in the center with armed operators on all sides. Maya took point initially, using the fatting light to navigate by terrain features. Her head pounded with each step, her vision occasionally doubling, but she pushed through, focusing on the mission. The first 100 meters were the most dangerous, still visible from the ridgelines, still close enough to their old position that the Taliban might have eyes on them. They moved in near silence, the only sounds the soft crunch of boots on loose rock and the occasional labored breath from the wounded. Then they plunged into the thick vegetation of the mountain slope, and the real work began. The terrain was everything Maya had promised, steep, rocky, covered in thorn bushes that tore at clothing and exposed skin. The litters had to be maneuvered around obstacles, lifted over fallen logs, tilted sideways to squeeze through narrow gaps between boulders. Every obstacle cost time and energy. 20 minutes in, Wilson stumbled on loose scree, nearly dropping Chen's litter. Maya was there instantly, her broken arm screaming in protest as she grabbed the litter rail with her good hand, steadying it until Wilson regained his footing. "I've got it," Wilson gasped, his breathing heavy from exertion. "I know you do," Maya said. "Take 30 seconds, breathe." They rotated positions after the first kilometer. Hernandez and Clark took Chen while Mitchell and Wilson carried Davis. Maya tried to spell one of them, insisting she could take a corner of the litter despite her injuries. "Negative," Mitchell said firmly. "You navigate. That's the most important job right now." He was right, though Maya hated admitting it. Her broken arm was useless for sustained carrying, and her ribs wouldn't allow her to take the kind of load-bearing stress the litters required. But she could read terrain, could find the path of least resistance through impossible landscape, could keep them moving in the right direction even as darkness fell completely. They activated their night vision devices, the world turning into green-tinted shadows and shapes. Maya borrowed Wilson's monocular NVG, using it to scan ahead while relying on her natural vision for close terrain. Then came the moment they'd all been dreading. "Contact left," Hernandez hissed. 20 yards away, 3 Taliban fighters were moving through the same terrain, probably part of a search team looking for survivors from the helicopter crash. They hadn't spotted the SEAL team yet. The darkness and vegetation provided concealment, but they were heading directly toward the Americans' position. Mitchell made a quick hand signal, "Freeze." The team became statues, the wounded men holding their breath despite their pain. The Taliban fighters moved closer. 15 yards. 10. Maya could hear them talking in Pashto, one of them gesturing back toward where the helicopter had crashed. They were arguing about something, search patterns probably, or which direction survivors might have fled. 8 yards. Maya's hand tightened on her pistol. If they were spotted now, a firefight would bring every Taliban fighter in the valley down on their position. The wounded wouldn't survive it. 6 yards. One of the fighters stopped, his head turning as if he'd heard something. He raised his AK-47, scanning the darkness. Maya's finger moved to the trigger, if he took one more step, if he looked in the right direction. Then, from somewhere far off, came the sound of an explosion. The Taliban fighters' heads snapped toward the noise, probably one of the American teams detonating ordnance at the crash site, destroying sensitive equipment to keep it from enemy hands. The 3 fighters ran toward the sound, disappearing into the darkness. Mitchell waited a full 60 seconds before giving the signal to move. They did, faster now, knowing that luck wouldn't save them twice. The second kilometer was worse than the first. The terrain grew steeper, forcing them to practically climb in some sections. Maya, with her one good arm, pulled herself up rock faces, while the SEAL team muscle-carried the litters through passages that seemed impossible. Chen cried out once when his litter tilted at a bad angle, sending pressure through his chest wound. Davis bit down on a piece of leather to keep from screaming when they had to turn his litter nearly vertical to get past a boulder. Maya stayed with them constantly, checking vitals during each brief halt, adjusting bandages, monitoring for shock and hypothermia as the mountain temperature dropped. "Talk to me, Chen," she said during one stop, checking his pupils with a small red lens flashlight. "Stay present." "I'm here, Doc," Chen whispered. "Hurts like hell, but I'm here." "That's the spirit, Davis." "Peachy," Davis said through clenched teeth. "Just peachy." By 2100 hours, they'd covered 1.7 kilometers. They were close now, so close. But the final 300 meters were the most exposed, a relatively open slope leading to the extraction point clearing. And somewhere behind them, Maya could hear voices. The Taliban search teams were getting closer, spreading out, tightening the noose. "How much farther?" Mitchell asked, checking his GPS. 300 meters, maybe less, Maya replied, studying the terrain ahead. "But it's open ground if they spot us." "They'll have clear shots for 300 meters, Mitchell finished grimly. "But we don't have a choice." Maya looked at the 2 wounded men, then at the exhausted SEAL team who'd carried them this far. She thought about Torres and Chen, gone in the crash. She thought about Kim, whose fate she still didn't know. She thought about all the missions, all the saves, all the times she'd promised to bring brothers home. "Then we move fast and we don't stop," Maya said, steel in her voice. "These men didn't survive this long to die 300 meters from rescue." Mitchell nodded. "Let's bring them home." They stepped into the open, into the killing ground, racing against time and Taliban fighters for the lives of 2 wounded warriors. The clock was ticking. The open slope stretched before them like a gauntlet, 300 meters of exposed mountainside with minimal cover, bathed in pale moonlight that would make them visible to anyone watching. Maya Rodriguez took point, her night vision scanning for threats while the SEAL team followed in a tactical column, the 2 litters carried between them. They made it 50 meters before the world exploded. "Contact rear," Wilson shouted as muzzle flashes erupted from the tree line they'd just left. The Taliban search teams had found them. Rounds cracked through the air, striking rocks and kicking up dirt. The SEAL team dropped into whatever cover they could find, shallow depressions, scattered boulders, anything. Wilson and Hernandez set Chen's litter down behind a rock outcropping, while Mitchell and Clark did the same with Davis. "Suppressing fire," Mitchell ordered. The able-bodied SEALs returned fire, their night vision allowing them to pick targets in the darkness. Taliban fighters dropped, but more kept coming, their numbers swelling as fighters from across the valley converged on the sound of gunfire. Maya crawled to Chen and Davis, checking them both rapidly. "You guys okay?" "Define okay," Chen gasped, his breathing rapid but stable. "Compared to you, we're fantastic," Davis added, managing dark humor despite the situation. Maya popped up long enough to fire 3 rounds from her pistol at a fighter who'd gotten too close, then dropped back down as return fire peppered her position. "Mitchell, we can't stay here. They're going to flank us." She was right. The Taliban were already moving to envelope their position, using the terrain to their advantage. In 5 minutes, maybe less, the SEAL team would be surrounded. "We move now," Mitchell made the decision. "Hernandez, Wilson, get Chen moving. Clark and I have Davis. Rodriguez, you're on." The distinctive whoosh of an RPG cut him off. The rocket-propelled grenade streaked overhead, missing by mere feet before detonating against a boulder 30 yards behind them. The concussion wave washed over them, leaving ears ringing. "Go, go, go," Mitchell roared. They ran. The litter bearers stumbled across the uneven ground, trying to maintain speed while keeping the wounded stable. Maya provided rear security, firing her pistol at pursuing shadows, buying precious seconds. 75 meters, then 100. Then disaster struck. The paracord lashing on Chen's litter snapped with a sharp crack. The makeshift stretcher collapsed, dumping the wounded SEAL onto the rocky ground. Chen cried out, his chest wound screaming with the impact. "Litter's down," Hernandez shouted. There was no time to repair it. Taliban fighters were less than 100 yards behind, closing fast. The SEALs would have to carry Chen without the litter, but both Hernandez and Wilson were already exhausted from carrying him the first 2 kilometers. "I've got him." Maya appeared beside Chen, holstering her pistol. "Rodriguez, you can't," Hernandez started. "Watch me." What happened next became the stuff of legend among Special Operations Forces. Maya Rodriguez, at 56 and 145 pounds, with a broken left arm, fractured ribs, severe concussion, and massive blood loss, grabbed Petty Officer James Chen, 61, 210 pounds of solid muscle and tactical gear, and hauled him onto her back in a fireman's carry. The pain was transcendent. Her ribs felt like they were tearing through her lungs. Her broken arm, even splinted, screamed in protest. Her legs trembled under the weight, but she took 1 step, then another, then another. "Rodriguez, stop, you'll kill yourself," Mitchell shouted, still carrying Davis's litter with Clark. Maya didn't stop, couldn't stop. She'd made a promise. "These things we do that others may live." Those weren't just words. They were her life, her purpose, her reason for being on this God-forsaken mountain. "Keep moving," she gasped between steps, each word costing her precious oxygen. "Don't stop for me." Hernandez and Wilson took positions on her flanks, providing security while this impossible woman carried their wounded brother toward salvation. They fired at pursuing Taliban fighters, dropped smoke grenades to obscure their movement, did everything they could to protect her while she did the impossible. 150 meters covered. Chen was semi-conscious on her back, his blood soaking into what was left of her uniform. "Hang on, brother," Maya whispered to him. "Almost there, almost home." Her vision tunneled. She couldn't feel her legs anymore, operating on pure will. Each breath was agony. Her body was shutting down, systems failing one by one. But she wouldn't stop, wouldn't quit, wouldn't let Chen die on this mountain. 200 meters. Then the Taliban executed a tactical maneuver that threatened to end them all. A group of fighters appeared on their right flank, moving to cut them off from the LZ. They had the angle, had the speed. They were going to reach the clearing first. Maya saw it happening, saw the trap closing, saw their escape route about to be sealed. She made a decision. "Mitchell, take Chen." She practically dumped the wounded SEAL into Hernandez's and Wilson's arms. Then she turned toward the flank attack, her mind racing. Back at the crash site, scattered among the debris, there had been ordnance, smoke grenades, flares, maybe even fragmentary grenades that had been scattered from the helicopter. She'd grabbed what she could, stuffing items into her cargo pockets without really cataloging them. Her fingers found them now. 2 smoke grenades, 1 thermite grenade, and a flare. "What are you doing?" Mitchell demanded. "Creating a diversion. Get to the LZ. I'll catch up." "Rodriguez." "That's an order, Commander," Maya snapped with an authority that surprised them both. "Get those men to extraction, now." She didn't wait for an argument. She ran, stumbled, really, toward a small rise between the SEAL team and the flanking Taliban fighters. Her plan was insane, desperate, and had maybe a 10% chance of working. It was also their only chance. Maya climbed the rise, her broken body protesting every movement. She could see the Taliban fighters now, maybe 30 of them, moving fast toward the clearing. They hadn't seen her yet, a single figure in the darkness. She pulled the pin on the thermite grenade, counted to 2, and threw it as far as her broken body could manage toward a cluster of rocks. Then she dropped, crawled 10 feet left, pulled the pins on both smoke grenades and rolled them downslope toward the Taliban position. The thermite grenade detonated with a brilliant white flash, burning at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The Taliban fighters instinctively turned toward it, thinking they were under attack from that direction. The smoke grenades added to the chaos, billowing thick colored smoke that obscured vision and created confusion. Then Maya fired the flare straight up into the air. The parachute flare ignited, bathing the entire area in harsh red light, casting crazy shadows and destroying night vision. The Taliban fighters, caught in the open, suddenly blinded and confused, began firing at shadows, at each other, at anything that moved. In the chaos, Maya half ran, half fell down the slope toward the LZ. She could see the clearing now, could see the SEAL team setting up a defensive perimeter, could see them looking back toward the madness she'd created. She was 50 meters from safety when her legs finally gave out. She collapsed, tried to get up, collapsed again. Her body had nothing left. She'd pushed it past every limit, ignored every warning sign, operated on willpower alone. But even willpower had limits. "I'm sorry," she whispered to no one. "I tried." Then strong hands grabbed her arms, pulling her upright. Hernandez and Wilson had come back for her. "We don't leave anyone behind," Hernandez said simply. "Especially not someone who just saved all our asses." They carried her the final distance, her feet dragging, her consciousness flickering like a candle in the wind. Behind them, the Taliban fighters were still shooting at shadows, still trying to figure out what had happened. Maya's head lolled back, looking at the sky. And there, cutting through the darkness, she saw the most beautiful sight in the world. Navigation lights, red and green, growing larger, accompanied by the distinctive thump of rotor blades. The extraction bird was inbound. They'd made it. 2 kilometers through enemy territory. 2 wounded men carried through impossible terrain. 1 impossible woman who'd refused to quit. They'd made it. As the Black Hawk descended into the LZ, its door gunners laying down suppressive fire, Maya allowed herself to smile despite the blood and pain and exhaustion. Mission accomplished. The Black Hawk's interior was a symphony of organized chaos. Medics worked frantically on Chen and Davis, establishing IV lines, monitoring vitals, administering morphine. The crew chief shouted updates to the pilots over the intercom. Door gunners tracked potential threats below with their night vision, ready to engage if Taliban fighters tried one last desperate shot. Maya Rodriguez sat against the bulkhead, her body finally allowed to acknowledge the full extent of its trauma. Blood loss, shock, and exhaustion were claiming their due. A crew medic, a young airman named Patterson, tried to examine her injuries, but Maya weakly pushed him away. "Them first," she mumbled, gesturing toward Chen and Davis. "I can wait." "Ma'am, you're in bad shape. You need." "I said I can wait." Her voice carried an edge that brooked no argument. Patterson backed off, though he kept a worried eye on her. Maya's head lolled against the vibrating metal of the helicopter's interior. She could feel herself slipping away, consciousness becoming a slippery thing she couldn't quite hold on to. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell dropped into a crouch beside her. His face was streaked with dirt, sweat, and the residue of combat, but his eyes were clear and filled with something Maya couldn't quite identify. Respect, awe, gratitude. "Rodriguez," he said, having to raise his voice over the rotor noise. "What you did back there. I've been a SEAL for 12 years. I've served with the best warriors on the planet, and I've never seen anything like that." Maya tried to respond, but her mouth wasn't cooperating properly. The words came out slurred, "Just doing my job." "Your job?" Mitchell shook his head in disbelief. "Your job was to provide medical support from a helicopter. You weren't supposed to survive a crash, climb through enemy territory with catastrophic injuries, stabilize 2 casualties with improvised equipment, then carry a man twice your size through a firefight. That wasn't your job. That was." He paused, searching for words. "That was brotherhood," he finally said. "That was what we all talk about but few ever truly live. You're one of us now, Rodriguez. Today, you became a SEAL in everything but name." Coming from Mitchell, those words meant everything. But Maya's vision was graying at the edges. She managed a small nod before her eye closed. Ma'am, Patterson was beside her instantly, checking her pulse. "She's crashing, blood pressure's dropping." The next 15 minutes were a blur. Medics worked on her now, whether she wanted them to or not. IV lines were established. Her broken arm was properly stabilized. Her ribs were wrapped. They couldn't do much else in flight, but they did what they could to keep her alive until they reached the base. Chen and Davis were stable. Critical but stable, they'd survive. Now it was Maya's turn to fight for her own life. Forward Operating Base Sharana was unusually quiet for 22-30 hours. The flag still flew at half-staff. In the operations center, Commander James Peterson sat at his desk, the memorial service schedule in front of him. Services for Captain Torres, Lieutenant Chen, Sergeant Kim, and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez would be held in 3 days. The letters to their families had already been sent. Peterson rubbed his eyes, exhausted. He'd been in command for 18 months and had lost 23 soldiers in that time. Each one carved a piece from his soul. But Maya Rodriguez's death hit differently. She'd been special, not because she was a woman, but because she'd embodied everything the military aspired to be: skilled, dedicated, selfless. "Sir," Major Williams appeared in his doorway. We've got an inbound medevac, SEAL team extraction. They took casualties. Peterson nodded tiredly. Prep the aid station. How bad? 2 urgent surgical, 1 routine. There. Williams paused, reading the report again as if she couldn't believe it. Sir, you need to come to the landing pad. Now. Something in her voice made Peterson stand. What's wrong? Just please come, sir. They ran across the base toward the helipad, where lights were already blazing. Personnel were assembling, medical staff, the quick reaction force that had searched the crash site, even some SEALs from other teams who'd heard their brothers were coming in wounded. The Black Hawk descended through the darkness, its landing lights cutting through the dust it kicked up. Peterson watched it settle onto the pad, rotors still turning, the crew chief jumping out to help with the casualties. The first stretcher emerged, Petty Officer Chen, conscious but clearly in pain. Medics rushed forward, taking the litter and heading toward the aid station at a run. The second stretcher, Petty Officer Davis, pale but giving a thumbs up to his teammates. Then the Black Hawk's crew chief reached inside to help the final casualty. And Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez stepped onto the tarmac. She was a nightmare vision, uniform shredded and blood-soaked, left arm splinted with tree branches and paracord, face crusted with dried blood, one eye swollen completely shut. She swayed on her feet, barely conscious, held upright only by sheer determination and the crew chief's supporting hand. But she was walking, she was alive. Commander Peterson felt his heart stop. Around him, the assembled personnel stood frozen in shock. This was impossible. Maya Rodriguez was dead. He'd signed the papers. He'd sent the letters. The flag was at half-staff for her. Yet there she stood. Maya's one functioning eye found Peterson in the crowd. She took a halting step toward him, nearly fell, caught herself. Then, with painful precision, she raised her right hand in a salute that would have made drill instructors weep. Sir, her voice was barely a whisper, but in the sudden silence it carried clearly. 2 urgent surgical, 1 routine medical, mission complete. Peterson couldn't speak, couldn't move. He stood there, watching this ghost render a report, watching this impossible woman who should have been dead complete her final duty before allowing herself to collapse. Medic, someone shouted, breaking the spell. Medical personnel rushed forward as Maya's legs buckled. They caught her before she hit the ground, immediately beginning treatment even as they loaded her onto a stretcher. As they carried her past Peterson toward the aid station, he found his voice. Rodriguez, Rodriguez. Her eye opened slightly, found his face. Welcome home, soldier, Peterson said, his voice thick with emotion. Welcome home. The faintest smile touched her bloody lips. Then she was gone, rushed into surgery where doctors would spend 6 hours repairing the damage her body had sustained. Peterson stood on the tarmac long after the helicopter had departed, long after the crowd had dispersed. Major Williams approached quietly. I'll get the memorial service canceled, she said softly, and notify the families that. Wait, Peterson held up a hand. He walked to the flagpole at the center of the base, where the American flag hung at half-staff in honor of the dead. Slowly, deliberately, he raised it back to full height. Because Maya Rodriguez hadn't died. Against every odd, against every logical expectation, she'd survived. More than survived, she'd saved 2 lives, had led a team through enemy territory, had embodied everything it meant to be a warrior. 3 weeks later, Maya stood at attention in the base chapel, her left arm in a proper cast now, her ribs still wrapped but healing. Commander Peterson pinned the Air Force Cross to her dress uniform, the service's second highest decoration for extraordinary heroism in combat. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. Despite catastrophic injuries and in complete disregard for her own safety, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez carried wounded personnel through enemy-controlled territory, neutralized enemy threats, and ensured the successful extraction of all team members. Her actions reflect the highest credit upon herself and the United States Air Force. But the words didn't capture it, didn't capture the 2 kilometers through hell, didn't capture carrying men who outweighed her by 75 pounds, didn't capture the moment she chose to face death so her brothers could live. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell stood in the front row, along with Chen and Davis, both recovered, both alive because of the woman receiving the medal. When Peterson finished the ceremony, Mitchell stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," he said formally, "on behalf of every SEAL team, I want to present you with this." He handed her a trident, the SEAL insignia, the symbol of their brotherhood. "You earned it," Mitchell said simply. "You're one of us." Maya took the trident, her throat tight with emotion. Around the chapel, warriors who'd doubted her, who'd questioned whether a woman belonged in combat, stood and applauded. Not because she was a woman, but because she was a warrior. A true warrior who'd proven that courage, skill, and the will to save lives transcended gender. Petty Officer Chen approached, walking with only a slight limp now. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You gave me my life back." Davis was beside him, "Both of us." Maya smiled, the first genuine smile since the mission. "Just doing my job, gentlemen." "No," Mitchell corrected, joining them. "You did something far more important. You showed all of us what it really means to leave no one behind." Years later, when people asked Maya Rodriguez about that night, about the crash, the climb, the carry, she always gave the same answer. "They would have done the same for me. That's what brothers and sisters in arms do. We fight for each other, we bleed for each other, we carry each other home, every single time, no matter what." And because of her, because of what she proved on that mountain in Afghanistan, the conversation about women in combat changed forever. Not through arguments or politics, but through actions, through courage, through one woman who refused to quit, refused to fail, refused to let her brothers die. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez had been declared dead. But she'd walked out of the valley, carrying her brothers on her back. And in doing so, she'd carried the hopes of every woman who would follow in her footsteps into the future. Some bonds even death can't break. That's the bond of warriors. That's the bond Maya Rodriguez proved exists beyond gender, beyond doubt, beyond everything except the simple truth. We are all capable of extraordinary heroism when we fight for something greater than ourselves. The mission wasn't just completed that day. It changed everything.